Hello and welcome back to WTF MCP with all your MCP knowledge. Right here, between the two of us, we know everything there is to know.
Yeah, at least the first couple pages of the rule book, probably.
Yeah, maybe one of the middle ones too. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
You get to decide which one it is, too.
Yeah.
Let us know in the
23.
comments.
Uh, hey, I'm Jay Shalansky. That's Tim France, and we're here to talk to you about Marvel Crisis Protocol. Today's episode, we're going to cover different event types. We had a episode, like one of our first four episodes was talking about all the different event types. Well, now we're going to dig in a little bit deeper, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about timeline and affiliation event types.
Mhm.
So, Tim, dealer's choice.
So I love both of these formats.
Oh, do
I
you?
I do. Let's start with affiliation.
All right, hit me.
So affiliation battle is one of the ways that, as far as some of the responses that I get, people feel like this is the true way to play MCP. The basic premise is that every single character that you bring in your roster
Mm-hmm.
has to belong to the same affiliation.
Yep.
If you're playing Avengers, you're bringing the Avengers. You're not throwing in an X-Man or two unless they're also part of Avengers. But and you're also allowed a couple rogue agents like
Yep.
Taskmaster or Winter Soldier to help fill it out, because there are a couple of affiliations like Winter Guard. Granted, they've recently gotten a bump up and some more characters, or Sentinels that need a
Yep.
little bit of help as far as building out a full roster. But you do not have to bring 10 characters to this either, especially if your affiliation is a little light.
Yep.
But the entire premise of this is you're actually playing the more narrative theme. You are
Right.
playing characters that are intended to work together under the same, title, heading, group, badge number,
Yep.
like kind of the whole nine. And it's a really, really fun way to play that helps curve out some of the extremes of people splashing very popular or strong characters, like Beta Ray Bill,
Yeah.
Hulk, Mortal
Perfect.
Hulk.
Those are both great examples.
Yeah, right. So if you want to run Cabal, so you can have Malekith and God Emperor Red Skull or whatever, you totally can.
Yeah.
But you're not Hulk's not going to be showing up and helping you.
Right. Yeah. And now, does sleeper agent stuff sidestep affiliation?
So there are a couple different ways affiliation has been run, especially with some of the affiliation rules like Hellfire Club or Dark Dimension, sleeper agent, reserve agents, things like that. And for the most part, no, those
Okay.
don't function. Some of the more recent affiliation battles have been saying, you know what, we want Emma Frost to be there. We want um, uh, Dormammu to be there. So we allow their specific affiliation
Okay.
creation
Yeah.
abilities, but not with Tactus cards.
Right.
So that one hurts, particularly Sentinels, one of my favorite groups, has a tactics called Under Your Skin, where you can infect someone with nanites and they're a Sentinel now. But
Ooh.
you have to be with an affiliation beforehand anyway. So it can't
Uh,
help you make affiliation.
right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting. I do like it. It's just a different way to look at the game, and um, because normally, when you're playing, in order to use an affiliated leader's ability and to be an affiliation, you have to be it's over 50%, right? It's like,
Over 50. Yep.
yeah. So if you have five people on the board, three have to be affiliated. And this says saying everyone has to be affiliated, right? You don't
Mm-hmm.
have a choice there. And I think I do like it, but in all fairness, I play mostly affiliations that are have a lot of characters to choose
Yeah.
from. So, like Avengers or X-Men, like yeah, sure, you can play affiliated. There's tons of characters for them. It's not a
Was
problem.
there a non-Avenger you even wanted to use? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
right, right. And so, but I could definitely see where, like, if you're playing, I don't know, like some of the smaller affiliations, right? It becomes a harder choice to like choose some of the stuff that you love.
well, and the difference between now and a year ago is also pretty diverse as well, because
Yeah,
like groups like Web Warriors or Spider Foes and
yeah,
Wakanda had limited access to
yeah.
10 characters. But they've really kind of filled that in quite a bunch with a bunch of the new releases. Spider Foes is, over the next couple months going to be in a very good spot for it. Um, but I think affiliation battle is really kind of like, if you're going to be going to your first event,
Yeah.
as a newer MCP player. I think most people are brought into this game because they really like a particular affiliation or group. They're like, I'm a
Yeah.
big mutant guy, so I want to play X-Men and Brotherhood, or I'm a huge Avengers fan. So it really kind of helps you get your legs under you without having to worry about some of the
Yeah.
higher extremes.
Well, and I think there's only winter. I mean, there's only like some that have like, what's Winter Guard got? They've got seven, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven.
And that
Um,
was a recent addition. They had four for like two
right.
years,
Yeah,
and then
right.
they added Black Widow and Winter Soldier and Omega Red, I think, to make the seven.
And I think so, like realistically, outside of the three, like Dark Dimension, Hellfire Club, and Sentinels, most of the other ones have roughly seven. Like even Black Order has seven.
Yep.
Um, so you could, I think no matter what you're playing, there's a solid chance you'll have at least seven. Besides
Yes.
those three, you'll have seven to access. But it's
Well, and
just
then two rogue agents too, right? So then
right,
you can break that 7 to 9, and Winter Soldier's no slouch.
right,
He
right.
doesn't mind being involved.
Yeah, and so it's super interesting, and I like it. Again, I play Avengers and X-Men, so like Avengers specifically, it's like almost everybody's an Avenger at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're completely good there. But I do remember the first affiliation battle I played. What are the battles that don't have affiliation? They're just regular events that you can bring whatever you want. What do we call those?
Challenger events.
Right, Challenger, yeah.
Or
So,
after yesterday's announcement, now the GT is
GTs,
also, which
yeah,
also uses the Challenger event rules.
yeah. But yeah, so I had only played Challenger the first couple, so I was like Avengers Beta Ray Bill. And then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden it was like somebody told me I couldn't run beta, and I was like, oh, right, right. But then they came out with the new core set, so that's okay now because Thor is basically the new printed Thor with the new cap is
Yeah.
so good that it just you don't even need Hulk really anymore. But yeah, so I've always played Avengers, which is nice for affiliation. But yeah, I do like affiliation. Like I get it. I get that everyone has fought with everyone in the Marvel comics. I do understand that. It
Mm-hmm.
is a hard pill for me to swallow sometimes when you have like Thanos with the Guardians or something, and
Yeah.
you're like,
At least that one, like, at least they're like within the same neighborhood.
yeah,
Thanos
maybe.
and Web Warriors was a huge thing
Yeah,
for
you're
a
right. Oh,
while of
yeah,
just,
that one's interesting.
Miles
Yeah,
Morales, Peter, and Thanos, the bestest of friends. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you see like, uh, somebody that you would never see, like a Red Skull, like
mm-hmm.
teaming up with like the heroes, and you're like, I don't
Yeah,
think so. But
which is a great part of the game, right? Being able to
yes,
splash in
yes,
whoever you want. But in affiliation battle, I don't know. I've run a bunch of them at this point, and I feel like each time I run one of those events, I see a bigger um, variation in what people are bringing.
yeah,
Seeing Shield really pop off as Shield, Web Warriors, like I said, Spider Foes and Criminal Syndicate, Avengers. Like normally everyone's pretty represented at those, which is very cool to see.
yes. Yeah, it's just super interesting way to play the game, and I think it just makes it more interesting when you're coming into an event, and it makes you think about the game differently when you have to use only within your affiliation, which is nice.
Well, we talked about it a little in the post Epicon episode, right? Where like you see the display boards and people really identifying with the affiliation of the group that they're running. Like you get a little bit of that at affiliation battles because they're bringing out their custom sleeves and tokens
Yeah,
and tools and stuff like that all fit, with the affiliation that they really care about.
yeah, yeah, agreed. Yeah, all right. Well, so that's affiliation. So the second one we were going to talk about in this episode was timeline. So let's go ahead, Tim, give us a little view
Yes,
into timeline.
so Timeline was kind of announced right before Gen Con last year.
Yeah,
At Adepticon this year, they had the first really big like official Timeline event, and this really kind of mixed stuff up a bit. So the premise of Timeline is that you are playing and everyone else is playing with a particular group of characters from a particular event or area. In the current system, it's like terrestrial characters. There's no
Yeah.
Guardians, there's no Black Order, there's no super space witches or anything like that. It's just dudes and mutants on the streets punching each other.
Yeah.
Um, and I think this is very neat. And they have kind of another caveat as well, where this format is going to be changing every year. Normally, starting at Adepticon, it'll be a different group of characters. I mean, we're closing in on 200 characters, I think,
Yeah.
currently. And in Timeline, I think there was a total of like 92, 94, something like
Yeah.
that were allowed in the event. The other caveat is that you bring 3 rosters to the event.
Yeah.
You can reuse characters no times. You get 1 of each Tactics card, and that's it. Cannot run them in more than 1 roster, and same with Crisis cards. So you have to be very, very careful and very, very thoughtful when making your roster.
Yeah.
That number 1, all the characters are in the Timeline event,
Yeah.
and number 2, that you don't need that piece somewhere else. So some
Right.
of those very powerful splashes, you have to, make
Yeah.
a sacrifice here or
Yeah.
there. And some of the, like, kind of we talked about with affiliation battle, uh a lot of the big very powerful splashes just aren't there. You
Yeah.
can't rely on those kind of crutches like a Hulk or a Beta Ray Bill or Ghost Rider or Cosmic Ghost Rider. And you got to be a lot more targeted with your
Yeah.
play, which I think is very cool. And it was initially put out there as, hey, this is an event that's about mastery, not playing that one list that you play every week 9,000 times until you've done it to death. This
Yeah.
is, you need 3 different lists and you play them in order,
Yep.
which is also kind of interesting. Your first round is roster 1, second round is roster 2, third round is roster 3, and then rounds 4, 5, and 6 are the same. And then you reverse it for a top cut.
Yep. Yeah, it's a super interesting concept, and I like the idea of it, and I like, and I think not that there's a ton of negative about it, but I think some of the negative that you may hear about Timeline in particular, because these are more like street level hero type things, is I think that may go away once they like the next season of Timeline comes out and they change it to be whatever the next, maybe the next one is space.
Space opera.
Yeah, yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so now you can use Guardians and all these other ones, and so, I think that's the only real negative that I've heard about it is just like having access to some of these other characters, but as they rotate the new seasons, we'll hopefully see that, and it's nice, and it gets you thinking about the game differently, and um I just wonder, like, some of the, from a mechanic standpoint, some of it
Mhm.
makes sense why certain, like the Hulk, isn't allowed in here. But also the question is, why not? He's the Hulk. Of course, he's part of all this. It's just, it's, it's okay to question things and just go, well, why? Like,
Well, I think too with this particular type of format, like I said, they're trying to take away some of the, not take away, but they're trying to limit some of
yeah,
the real heavy power that's out there that people rely on way too heavily. So
yeah,
I think the first year we were at Adepticon, every list had a Hulk and a Juggernaut in it. And it became just a lot of mirror matches of like, okay, well, this Juggernaut's
yeah,
hitting
yeah,
that Juggernaut, and then the Hulk says no until the other Hulk says, well, yes, actually. So, it helps there. And with that kind of like rotational balance, I think it's all going to be relative. So,
right.
is Hulk going to be in there with Thanos? Yeah, probably, because they're at very similar power levels.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. Yeah.
the other thing they did too was there's only one version of characters in this as well. So they removed some leaders and added others, especially with the
Yes.
new core box. So there's only one, for instance, I don't know, there's not a Doctor Strange in there at all, but there's only one Black Widow. There's only one Captain America, even though
Yeah.
there's 3 of each of those particular
Right.
models.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's good. That I don't mind as much. I like that because there should only be one, right? Like there, like, um, yeah. That is a thing about MCP that is interesting. Is the fact that like one character, like Steve Rogers, Captain America, can actually have 3 to 4 different representations
He's
in
been
the
around a while.
in the game, right? Which
Yeah.
I think for some makes sense. Like, sure, you could say with Cap that makes sense because he's 100+ years old and been part of all this different stuff.
Mhm.
But like, with Black Panther, it's got like what 3 versions now, 2.
Yeah, there's two with a third announced.
Yeah. And so it's just like it's interesting to me how that works and how they're treated as like a wholly different character instead of like it's just it's I don't know, it's just hard to like explain because it's so unique, I think.
I've heard it explained in a really good way, which is anytime they come out with a character, it's a snapshot of
Yeah.
that character at a particular time, right? So we have Captain America, the first Avenger, when the Avengers are first forming. We
Yep.
have World War II Captain America, where he's hanging out with Dum Dum Dugan and Nick Fury Sr. And then
Yep.
we have a more modern Captain America as well that understands, hey, sometimes we have to make a hard decision, and that hard decision is hitting three people every round.
Right.
But
Yeah. No, I like that explanation. Yeah, it's really good. And it's just I think it'll make more sense as they start like doing that with more characters because right
yes,
now it just seems like the same. You're like, oh yeah, Black Panther got another one. Oh yeah, Cap got another one. Oh yeah, Hulk. Yeah, I mean Hulk's only got two, but there's some
yeah.
that've got like three or four, and you're like, all right.
Well, and
Uh,
as far as some of like the negative stuff that initially came out in response to timeline being announced, people were like, "Well, I don't want to have to carry 30 models to my local game store every week."
yeah, right.
And this isn't meant for a
No,
weekend tournament. This is
right.
meant for premier events, big conventions, big
Yep,
cons that you're traveling to anyway. And 30 models, especially compared to other games out there, is not a lot.
yep.
It can certainly seem like that, but a lot of the cases I see people have are more than capable of carrying around the
Yeah.
30 models that people brought.
It's not a ton. I think it's probably a ton for people that came into this thinking they were only going to need 10 and then you're like, "Yo, I need 30 now?"
Right. Well, and that's the thing too is some of the stuff that I've seen is people are like, well, I really like this affiliation. So you're saying I can't play them at all for the year? No.
Right.
You're not even saying you can't not play those people at Adepticon. There's other events for that,
Yeah, right, right.
right? It's just this one is a premier event about mastery of the game as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about MCP in general. One of the great things is the fact that there's multiple event types.
Mhm.
So like, okay, if you're really that upset about it, then you don't have to do that. You could go play Challenger, you could go play Affiliation, you could go play Teams. You could like we're going to talk about most of these, but like, yeah, there's just so many other things you could be doing. Like, so, you really don't need to stress out about it.
Maybe you don't have any models at all, or you didn't
Yeah,
bring them because you're playing in Blood Bowl a weekend or something. Well,
right.
play in a what if. You
Go
don't
what
need
if?
models for
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was Affiliation and Timeline. Join us next week. We're going to continue talking about event types. Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here.
All right, everybody. Talk to you next week.